Girl Mary lived in the Kansas steppe with her puppy Toto, Uncle Henry and Aunt Em. In these places, hurricanes were common, and the family now and then hid in the cellar from the raging elements. One such day, Uncle Henry noticed an impending storm. He opened the cellar hatch and then called Mary and Aunt to hide. At that moment, the frightened Toto jumped off Mary's arms and hid under the bed. When the girl finally caught the puppy, the wind howled and the little house shook. The house turned around its axis several times and then began to slowly rise into the air like a balloon. Soon the house landed, and he and Toto went out into the street. A green lawn with fruit trees spread around, and amazing flowers grew everywhere. This is how Mary ended up in the magical land of Oz. While admiring the wonders of nature, the girl did not notice how very strange people in hats approached her. They were adults, but no larger than little Mary. Chief among them was an old woman dressed all in white. She approached Mary and thanked her for helping the girl defeat the evil sorceress. Mary was very surprised. Then the old woman pointed to the house, from under which protruded feet in silver shoes. At that moment, the legs disintegrated into hundreds of small particles and disappeared, leaving only their shoes. Mary was even more frightened because she really wanted to go home. But as it turned out, neither the old woman in white nor other strange people in caps knew how to help the girl. They advised Mary to put on the silver shoes of the witch, go to the Emerald City, and find the powerful wizard Oz there. Only he could help Mary return home. There was one yellow brick road leading to the Emerald City. Mary set off along it. The first she met was a cornfield guarded by a scarecrow. Instead of a head, he had a pouch filled with straw, and his mouth and nose were painted with paint. The scarecrow turned out to be alive, and his name was Scarecrow. He told Mary that he also wants to get to the Wizard Oz to ask him for brains. The girl took pity on the scarecrow, helped him climb over the fence, and they hit the road. The yellow brick road led Mary and the scarecrow into the forest. Suddenly they heard someone moan. A human figure gleamed in the thicket of the forest. It was the Tin Woodman. Its parts were so rusted that he could not move an arm or a leg. Then, in a hut nearby, Mary found an oil can. She lubricated the woodman's parts, and he began to move again. It turned out that the woodcutter had long dreamed of getting to the Wizard Oz to get a real heart. So together they continued their journey to the Emerald City. A yellow brick trail led friends through a dense forest. Suddenly a lion jumped out of the thicket onto the road. As soon as he swung his paws at the scarecrow, he heard Toto barking and was very frightened. The lion told Mary that he was born shy and therefore does not mind going to the Wizard Oz and asking for real courage. When the friends finally reached the Emerald City, the Great Oz agreed to fulfill their wishes, but set one condition. He asked to kill the Wicked Witch of the West. And my friends had to agree. Under cover of the night, Mary, the scarecrow, the lion, and the woodcutter made their way to the Witch of the West. She was waiting for them, and therefore sent flying monkeys to the friends. They threw the Tin Woodman off the cliff, poured all the straw out of the scarecrow, and captured Mary and Leo. When Mary was brought to the Witch of the West, driven to despair, she poured water on the witch. To the girl's surprise, the old woman began to melt, and soon only a muddy puddle remained of her. When the friends returned to the Emerald City and demanded that the wizard fulfill their wishes, it turned out that Oz was not a wizard at all, but a real deceiver. However, he tried to fulfill the requests of his friends. So, Oz stuffed the scarecrow's head with sawdust, from which he experienced a surge of wisdom. I inserted a scarlet silk heart into the Tin Woodman's chest. And he gave the cowardly lion a potion to drink, which made the king of beasts feel brave. Seeing Mary's silver shoes, Oz laughed. After all, the shoes were magic, and all this time they could carry the girl home. Mary said goodbye to her new friends, tapped her heel 3 times, and ended up at home with Toto. But the silver shoes were lost on the road. Not having stayed at home for a week, Lemuel Gulliver set off on another trip on the ship Good Hope. But after a few days the ship was overtaken by the pirates. They hijacked the ship and tied up the entire crew. Gulliver tried to escape, so as punishment, the pirates dropped him in a boat to the will of the waves and winds. For a long time Gulliver circled the open ocean, until he noticed land on the horizon. He swam to the shore and began to survey the land. Suddenly a huge shadow covered the sun. Raising his head, the astonished Gulliver saw a large island soaring in the sky. Exhausted by hunger and thirst, Gulliver began to scream, waving his hat, hoping that the inhabitants of the island would notice him. Then the natives took pity on Gulliver and lowered the stairs, so that he could climb the island. When Gulliver climbed the stairs, he found a crowd of very strange locals in front of him. Their heads were tilted to the right or left, with one eye looking inward and the other upward. And at each noble person there was a servant who patted the owner on the lips or ears, distracting him from his thoughts. Gulliver received a warm welcome.
Nice.
He was fed in the palace and even had a tour of the island. So, Gulliver realized that the earth soars in the sky due to a huge magnet, and at the base there is a giant diamond.
Okay.
But life in the flying kingdom was boring, so Gulliver soon returned to Earth. Before his eyes was a devastated country where local residents, dressed in rags, were starving. As it turned out, these people did everything in their lives the other way around. They built a house starting from the roof. They tried to get the sun's rays from cucumbers.
What?
And the artists were blindly mixing paint for paintings. Local scientists did not understand why words are needed in a language. After all, to everyone who began to argue, they simply cut out the brains and swapped them. Gulliver's surprise knew no bounds, and he hastened to leave the island. Going to neighboring lands, Gulliver found himself in the kingdom of darkness and gloom. Trembling with fear, he continued his journey. Suddenly a ghost appeared from the darkness. In fright, Gulliver tried to hide, but the spirit noticed him. He beckoned the traveler with a gesture, and Gulliver had no choice but to follow the ghost. Very soon they reached a large castle, and Gulliver was invited to a reception with the king. Walking through the castle, Gulliver saw hundreds of ghosts who cooked dinner, cleaned and guarded the chambers. It turned out that this country is ruled by a powerful sorcerer who can raise the dead. And all the living dead serve him. The wizard received Gulliver with honors. And to entertain such a rare guest, he began to revive anyone whom Gulliver asked. They were great warriors, sages, and even primitive people. But tired of wandering, Gulliver thanked the wizard and soon left the kingdom of darkness. He went to the nearest port, where he hoped to board a ship bound for England. Walking around the port, Gulliver immediately attracted attention. A foreigner in such places was a rarity, and therefore Gulliver was mistaken for a spy, seized and urgently taken to the local ruler. The foreigner was immediately found guilty. And as punishment, Gulliver had to crawl across the throne room on his stomach, licking the floor in his path. This was the custom. At the end, Gulliver bowed to the monarch 7 times, hitting his head on the floor. Then the governor looked thoughtfully at Gulliver, and then pardoned him. Miraculously freed, Gulliver ran out of the castle, and went to the nearest port, where he boarded an English ship. I must say that Gulliver never returned to these parts.